This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from across the continent and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the markets for you. So some relatively positive start to the day as far as South African equities are concerned. The All-Share Index, for instance, up by over 3.5%. It's been quite a while since we saw a one-day gain of this magnitude on South African indices. Mining shares were leading the gains today. BHP Bulletin, for instance, up by 7%, and Northern Platinum also up by over 12%. Why exactly did that happen? We'll explore that a little later in Commodities. In the meantime, here's what's coming up tonight. We'll take a look at how Uganda Airlines plans to return to the skies after the coronavirus pandemic. More than 2 million people who are self-employed are requesting financial support in the United Kingdom. And we'll take a look at a startup in Tunisia that's tracing people who are not wearing masks in public spaces. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start in the world of aviation. Uganda Airlines is using the downtime created by the COVID-19 pandemic to continue to secure new international routes. Now, the carrier is one of several state-owned airlines being revived by some African governments in a process that started and really peaked around 2019. Between September last year and March 22nd, some 80,000 passengers flew on Uganda Airlines' fleet of 4 aircraft across East Africa. It has secured the rights to fly to the Middle Eastern hub of Dubai, and it's seeking to secure similar rights to London and Guangzhou over in China. A few hours ago, I spoke to the CEO of the airline he described as a startup. I asked him why the carrier's growth plan is still on track despite the present pandemic.
In fact, the plan was that we'd run the regional program for 2 years before we go international. So essentially, the 4 CRJ 900 aircraft were to run to open up routes and build a hub through Entebbe International Airport in preparation for the 2 A330s which are coming at the end of 2020. And we are targeted to start, obviously, international operations when the A330s arrive.
Is that still on course, though? The A330s are still coming this year?
It is still on course. In terms of the funding side, obviously monies have been allocated in the budget for the capital required to purchase the aircraft. In terms of the plan to open routes, we have been working hard to get the permissions that we need. Principally, there are 3 routes we are looking at initially. The route to the UK, which is mainly London, and then to the Middle East, which is Dubai, and also to China. We are aiming for Guangzhou. So we have got permissions to operate to Dubai so far, and we are working on the other two routes.
Right. Walk me through how you're viewing this return to the skies plan. We've seen some airlines, and I'm referring to Comair here, for example, in South Africa. Their board was arguing that maybe at best we might see a resumption of flight operations somewhere in the 4th quarter of the year, around October, November. But even if you were able to fly at that point, what will the flying experience be like for passengers? If I board one of your CRJs from Nairobi coming over into Entebbe, what should I expect?
Yeah. First of all, I think before you even fly, you expect to get a lot of information from us, both on the website as well as within our offices, telling you what you will be expecting on these flights, and also explaining to you, for example, that in as much as you are in a confined cabin, the air circulation and the hyperfilters that are on the aircraft are good enough to take all the particles up to 99.95%. And that air, that circulation is removed every 3 minutes, which is better than a hospital, for example, where it's 10 minutes. And in our houses, it's at least 30 minutes. So that's one. Secondly, you can expect that flight attendants and all our people will have personal protective equipment. You can expect to be sanitized at several points. You also expect that your bags will be checked through, and they will also undergo a sanitization system. Our aircraft will also have sanitizers as well as enhanced cleaning, typically to make sure that there is disinfection before and after every flight. So those are some of the changes that you can expect to see.
One of the other things, just before we get to the airport bit, one of the other things that we've seen some competitors, some other airlines around the world doing is they're also spacing out passengers to some extent. So if you've got this big 777s, for example, every other seat is skipped and it's empty. Now, essentially that means that your revenue per passenger kilometer essentially drops quite a bit. And the CRJs you're flying have a capacity of about, 70 to 90 passengers. Is that feasible? Is that something you're considering doing?
It's not feasible to have social distancing on an aircraft. I think even when you have larger capacity long term, that is not a feasible option. So when you look at the risk on board, you're basically having person-to-person transmission. That's where the risk is, assuming that you can sanitize the entire cabin. So the expectation is that every person on board will either have a health certificate. In addition to that, they will have personal protective equipment.
And keep that health certificate bit in mind. We'll come back to that in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, let's focus on the continent's largest carrier, Ethiopian Airlines. It's been converting some of its passenger planes into dedicated cargo carriers in order to improve its revenue, following a huge decline in passenger traffic. The Ethiopian Airlines CEO, Tewolde Gebremariam, says that the airline has already converted 22 planes in order to meet a growing demand for cargo. CGTN's Beryl Oro has this report.
Engineers at Ethiopian Airlines are busy converting passenger planes into cargo freighters. With many countries having banned international flights, passengers around the world are grounded. Most countries have halted cross-border movements to curb the spread of the virus. This situation has hurt the aviation sector, forcing many airlines to adjust to survive. Many countries are prioritizing the importation of essential goods, and Ethiopian Airlines has scheduled more flights to ensure prompt delivery.
The majority are importers of COVID-19 personal protection equipment and medical supplies. And these are located in Africa, in Europe and America, and particularly Europe in the beginning when the COVID-19 spread was very high.
Ethiopian Airlines has not cancelled any jet purchases so far despite the collapse in air travel, though several orders, including some from Boeing and Airbus, have been delayed. The firm recorded a loss of $550 million between January and April, but has ruled out seeking a bailout from the Ethiopian government.
We are a little bit more optimistic. So we see some kind of maybe 50% recovery in the summer because it's a summer peak. And we see that people are sick and tired of the lockdown, as you can see in Europe and America. Governments are opening, even people are also going out because people were not meant to be locked down.
The global aviation industry has been hit by the coronavirus pandemic, forcing airlines that were once eager to order new planes to now scale back their flying schedules and park most of their planes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Aviation in focus continues in our company headlines. The Irish carrier Ryanair has announced a few uncertainties around its earnings in the course of the year. That's despite the firm shares surging by 8% on some relatively strong cost control and a $1.1 billion profit in the past financial year. Its CEO, Michael O'Leary, says that the airline's performance is dependent on a number of measures being taken by governments, including quarantine on international travellers, as proposed by the United Kingdom's government. Back here on the continent, Egypt is set to receive $127 million from the government due to the impact of the pandemic on its operations. The airline recently stopped regular scheduled international flights following the closure of airports around the world, really, to combat the spread of the pandemic. The government is expected to grant support to the carrier until it returns to at least 80% of its 2019 operational tempo. In the commodities side, the French oil giant Total has stopped plans to acquire Occidental Petroleum's assets in Ghana after authorities there blocked Total's acquisition of Occidental's assets in Algeria. Now, the deal was part of an $8.8 billion agreement reached between the two companies to hand over Anadarko's assets in Mozambique, Ghana, Algeria and South Africa. And finally, South Africa's energy regulator, NERSA as it's more commonly known, says it will allow Eskom to recover over $700 million from consumers for electricity supplied in the 2018-2019 financial year. The amount is much lower than the state-owned utility had applied for, however. The regulator adds that it will give its reasons once certain requirements have been finalized. It will also draw up, it says, an implementation plan for recovering those costs through tariffs within a reasonable period of time. That's a run through your headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Thank you for your time. Here's what's coming up shortly. We'll be taking a look at how tech companies are proving to be vital now more than ever as COVID-19 enhances its hold. And we'll take a look at how the pandemic is expected to dent Nigeria's remittance flows. All that and more coming up shortly.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. During this period of uncertainty amidst this pandemic, digital tools of various sorts are proving to be more vital now than ever before. Businesses and stock markets around the world are struggling to stay afloat with the rapid spread of COVID-19, but some tech companies are seeing a massive boost in revenue. Millions of people under lockdown are now turning to digital means in order to keep their companies afloat and, just as important, relevant for their audiences as well. Let's explore this as far as the media world is concerned. Moodys Juma joins us now live through Skype. He's the co-founder and CEO of MediaPal. It's an ad tech company that focuses essentially on programmatic advertising. Moodys, thank you for your time. Walk us through your operations from, say, the start of the year to end March. What percentage of your staff are now working remotely, and is this perhaps a permanent shift?
So thank you for having me today regarding Thank you for having me today on the platform. And regarding the COVID-19 interference today, when we started the year, we were on a good path. Probably it was a good year. We were looking at a good year, starting the Q1 on a good note, trying to achieve our Q1 projections. Then when March came now, we saw the boom. COVID came knocking, and most of us had to put our employees at work from home. Then working from home has being a tech company and a software as a service company, we've seen the work from home also become productive for us, as we didn't expect this as much. Yeah, so we've seen this work from home work for us also, and yeah, probably I think in the near future we'll have 1 or 2 days work from home every month.
Why 1 or 2 days? Why not just make it permanent and tell guys, look, unless you actually need to come to the office, don't bother. Just work remotely. We can track your productivity. Everyone's on Monday. We can talk on Blue Jeans or on Cisco WebEx. I mean, why not just make it permanent?
Don't forget, we're coming from a place where we were working from the office Monday to Friday, probably at times even the weekend. So maybe probably 1 or 2 days as we adjust, as we progress, we see how it goes. Because, you know, now being this a tech company, it favors us more. I guess other businesses and other verticals will suffer more compared to us. But yeah, so we'll just monitor as it progresses. And then, yeah, probably this will be the new norm, and we adapt and see, probably innovate something new that we never expected.
Right. Let's talk about the money side of it. Kenya's government has rolled out a couple of measures that are designed to make it slightly easier for companies and for individuals to essentially keep credit lines flowing or to be able to service what debt you have a little easier. We've seen the policy rate fall, for example. There's a 200 basis point cut over the last couple of months. Has your firm benefited from this, or is the funding environment still the same for you?
The funding environment is still the same for us. Probably this has favored guys, probably the pay side of things, and the VAT deduction from 16 to 14%. So the government has tried to do its bit, but this has not cushioned us as a business per se in regards to everything we're seeing. So everything is pretty much the same. But I guess the world economy is also crumbling down, and business are suffering, and probably the government can only do as much.
Are your banks, in conversations with your bankers, are they willing to extend credit to you, or are they more cautious at this point in time?
I guess at this moment, everyone is mark timing on the fact that everything gets better. We're just mark timing on the hope, and the banking side of the things as well. I think all of them are just mark timing. Otherwise, you'll all be receiving emails that the government has given us all these leeways and come get the money and come with the credit.
Okay, so you're operating in the advertising space, and on the traditional media side, you've seen newspaper circulation decline for the better part of 5 years now, actually longer than that. And we saw this huge contraction in ad spending on newspapers and in broadcast media in the first quarter of the year. How has this affected your business? I know you're on the programmatic end of it. Essentially, we're the guys who blame you for stealing our lunch. But, but what's business like for you in the first quarter?
So in the first quarter, regarding the newspaper, of course, the numbers have been falling. And this, of course, is because of the internet penetration. People are buying mobile devices every now and then, day in, day out. And so long as the numbers are going up, which means social media is on your hand, you can receive news. Basically, I'll call it news on demand. You just go online and you get the news even before it happens. So long as this is happening, newspaper numbers will always go down, digital numbers will always go up. And programmatic, we've been seeing the shift, more so during this COVID season, where March, when COVID came knocking, everyone put their outdoor traditional media, TV, everyone put them at a hold, and everyone was rushing back to digital. And they were like, you guys, you need to reach our audiences. Right now, they're working from home. The mobile device is the best way to reach them. You know their behaviors, you know their interests, reach them.
So spending on these outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Google Ads, and so on and so forth, we're seeing a shift on ad budgets that traditionally would have gone on to radio or TV. That's all now gone to these digital behemoths.
Yes. But the other thing that probably all hope is not lost, because when you talk about programmatic now comes aligned next to Facebook, next to the social Twitter and the rest, the digital platforms. There's programmatic where now you can even link now and do programmatic out of home, digital out of home programmatic. You can also now serve ads programmatic on TV. So we're not eating into your lunch per se. We're just promoting and complementing it.
Yeah, well, some would disagree, but we'll leave it there for the time being. Maurice Juma, thank you very much for your time this evening. All right then, so away from the business of advertising, let's conduct a simple thought experiment for this next segment, shall we? The Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, has warned that COVID-19, in his words, will be with us for a long time. To date, this coronavirus has infected over 4.7 million people. 315,000 have died from it so far. So if COVID-19 is here for the next 36 to 48 months, how can policymakers here in sub-Saharan Africa restart education in often overcrowded, poorly funded public schools? I explored that idea a little earlier with Dr. Githinji Gitahi. He's the CEO of the African Medical and Research Foundation.
We could actually start to look at how do we go back and what mechanisms do we put in place for the kids that every single child who is walking in has hand hygiene, which is confirmed and supervised, and every single child has a mask, which is supervised. We know that's going to be difficult, so we may start to experiment that at higher level. For example, instead of opening schools for everyone, you could actually open schools for class 8, 7, 6, and 5, the higher classes, because the younger kids actually, the impact of them not going back to school is not as severe as the ones who are in upper schools. So you could actually start by doing this piecemeal, by starting with the older ones, and then ensuring you have supervised hand washing and supervised mask wearing. The next thing on transport is the same, that the biggest risk in transport is the crowding again. That one we can actually enforce. In some countries like Uganda, they have said no public transport, and we've seen that in other countries. So you could actually also start to release public transport slowly, like say maybe we are going to start off with the trains, with the buses. You could actually do it slowly. In Kenya, we haven't closed public transport, but we've advised people to use masks because the masks stop people from shedding the virus.
And of course, on top of that, we'll also have to have some sort of standardized health certificate as well if you're talking about international travel too, especially on air.
That's going to be difficult because that's where we are hearing about COVID-19 certificates. But remember that unlike yellow fever, if you have not been exposed, you can still get the infection. In fact, the COVID-19 certificate, which is even more useful, is a post-infection certificate that says you've been infected and therefore you're likely to have a high level of immunity. But now that we are keeping people away from infection through social distancing, we have also to remember that a COVID-19 negative certificate does not mean that between the time you got the certificate and when you traveled and got to your destination that you didn't get infected.
Right. Let me turn to the other side of the equation, because anecdotally, what we're also hearing from some in the medical fraternity, from the hospital business side as well, some of the arguments that we're seeing now is that foot traffic into hospitals has virtually disappeared overnight. And that leads me to wonder, amidst this pandemic, as we're all focused on trying to deal with COVID-19, what are the other disease burdens that are essentially exploding in the darkness because people are either not getting the medical attention they need or they're simply too afraid to actually go to hospital?
Well, remember, and this is a really important conversation, remember that what we see in hospitals is a very small number of the general population, very, very small number. We estimate it's a very small percentage, 3-4%. But we see it as hospital occupancy. But then behind that is a huge public health activity that keeps people healthy. One is vaccination. Vaccination contributes to a significant number of people who visit the hospitals or visit the facilities when they are taking their children for vaccination, but they are not sick, so they are not counted as bed occupancy. But there is footfall, in the outpatient clinics. The other footfall is women who are pregnant who need to go for antenatal care. Now, what has happened is that all these things that the general public do not see as emergencies are the ones that have reduced. So a mother who probably would have taken, already 2 visits or 1 visit to antenatal care because she's pregnant but has no pain, no symptoms, has chosen not to because they see the fear that maybe they get infected when they go to the hospital. A mother who would have taken a child for vaccination has chosen not to because of the same fear and myth and the anxiety. Somebody who has hypertension and has medication may have chosen, instead of going to the outpatient clinic, to go to the pharmacy and refill their prescription. Somebody who has a swelling but doesn't pain may have chosen to wait a little longer before they go for a checkup. These are the people we are not seeing going to the hospital. The second wave of this pandemic may not be COVID itself. It may be all these other kind of missed opportunities of care. Mothers who didn't go to the hospital for antenatal care may now show up with a risk or may deliver at home. Or children who didn't get vaccination may show up with measles. We may see that people who didn't go for a refill of the HIV medication will have, extreme symptoms of AIDS. People who didn't go for the hypertension medication may have raised blood pressure. People who had diabetes didn't go for the medication. You may now see them in the hospital with diabetes complications.
Right then, on to the business of sovereign credit ratings. Moodys has kept Egypt's rating at steady at B2, and it forecasts that it will essentially remain relatively stable. The company is citing Cairo's strong economic policies, and it says the country has a relatively strong capacity to manage economic shocks. And that is despite the slowdown in the Egyptian economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With the details, here's CGTN's Adel El-Marouki.
Moodys saying Egypt's ongoing credit strength is unlikely to change under the COVID-19 pandemic. Backed by the country's economic reform, the firm believes that the current economic pressure will only delay but not derail Egypt's move to reduce debt.
Under the current global economic circumstances, for Egypt to still be capable to cover its financial obligations, that's a great indication, especially when compared to the regional countries. Our debt to GDP ratio is decreasing, and Moodys is noticing that.
That's on the medium-term forecast. But to keep that credit rating, though, Egypt must step away from any pursuit to restructure debt. That's why Cairo is moving to get more loans. It began with a $2.7 billion rapid relief instrument from the IMF and could seek up to $9 billion from various debt tools.
When Moodys hold our credit rating, this means that portfolio managers in the world's biggest financial institutions will consider Egypt. That means that we'll see good numbers flowing in as hot money and in the stock market.
Topped with this week's Central Bank of Egypt's decision to uphold overnight deposit and lending rates at 9.25% and 10.25%, risk analysts should see a premium in Egyptian bonds. That could create appetite for future offerings and ease the current foreign reserves bleed, which is estimated to go down to $30 billion by the end of the fiscal year this June.
Usually, Cairo would be seeking to improve its credit rating. But given the current circumstances, the high interest bill and the drop in revenues projected in the coming months, maintaining a B2 rating from Moodys is a great achievement. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Diaspora remittances are a critical source of foreign currency for Nigeria. At some point in time, it actually exceeds what the country makes from selling oil and gas. Remittances last year were estimated at about $25 billion. But this outbreak of COVID-19 right across the world is forecast to decimate inflows to Nigeria. CGTN's Deji Badmus filed this report.
For quite a number of Nigerians with relatives working abroad and who receive remittances frequently, the COVID-19 pandemic has been more or less a double jeopardy. Just as they're on lockdown in Nigeria, so are these relatives on lockdown abroad.
Some of them are out of work because of COVID-19. They will not have enough to send home to their relatives or to businesses or activities they have in Nigeria. So a drop is expected.
The World Bank estimates the drop in remittances could be up to 20%. An estimated 40 million Nigerians live outside the country. The Central Bank of Nigeria puts the total amount of their remittances in 2019 at $17.5 billion. But some other estimates put it higher, at $25 billion. The projected 20% decline would therefore have profound consequences for the individual recipients of the remittances.
These remittances are personal monies that have influenced livelihoods and are used as social safety nets by families and communities, and also by commerce and industry here in Nigeria. Some of it is used to pay school fees, definitely that will be affected. Some of it is used for health, that will be affected. Some of it is used for social events like funerals, weddings, naming ceremonies, and the others. All those will be affected.
And it's not just the individual recipients who would be affected. Over the past few years, diaspora remittances have become an important source of forex for the country, edging out both foreign direct and portfolio investments in 2018 and helping to build up reserves. The drop could pile further pressure on the local currency, which has been devalued as dollar revenue from oil slumps.
It's now more urgent than ever that we address our local manufacturing capacity for two reasons. One is to reduce imports. The other is to increase exports, because there are captive markets, certainly in West and Central Africa and even Southern Europe, that we can easily export to if we have the right quality of products.
As the world begins to open up again after the prolonged COVID-19 induced lockdown, the remittances are expected to gradually begin to climb back up. But some analysts say it might take up to a year before the remittances get to their pre-COVID-19 levels. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos.
Now, South Africa's horse racing sector is pleading with the authorities in Pretoria to allow them to have a partial restart in order to save the industry from collapse. Horse racing is still prohibited during the country's lockdown, and that in turn has led to massive losses for those involved in the industry. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the details.
For many sectors in South Africa, navigating through the economic challenges posed by COVID-19 has been difficult. The horse racing industry is no exception and has suffered major setbacks. It has grounded to a complete halt, and stakeholders have taken a serious financial hit.
I mean, the effect has been devastating. So, you know, I think it's week 9 of lockdown now, and racing hasn't been allowed to continue, even behind closed doors. And I mean, the most significant impact to date has been the fact that Pumalela, who is the largest operator of horse racing in South Africa, have got into business rescue, and they were very close to, in fact, going all the way into liquidation as opposed to business rescue.
Most stakeholders believe Pumalela Gaming and Leisure's downfall won't just affect shareholders. They fear it could have a ripple effect across the industry. Jockeys, trainers, owners, groomsmen and several others all risk losing their jobs should a solution not be found.
Well, there's around 60,000 jobs on the line. And our organisation, South African Equine Health and Protocols, which has been heavily involved in opening up the exports, has now targeted our team into looking into implementing the COVID-19 risk mitigation measures. We've worked with Wits Health Consortium, and I believe that we've got measures in place that will pass any scrutiny and, most importantly, protect lives. But we do need to get back to racing. We believe we can do that in an extremely safe environment.
It's not all bad news, though, because a donor has stepped in with funding that will see the industry stay afloat for at least another 6 months. The Mary Oppenheimer family donated more than $5.5 million. This should help stabilize operational finances in the near term.
At this stage, we've been, the National Horse Racing Authority's engagement has been to get racing started immediately, so within level 4. But given that there now seems to be hope that we're going into level 3 soon, I guess the focus will be to get horse racing allowed in level 3.
For now, the industry may just be closer to the projected finish line of achieving their goal of getting their bloodstock up and running again. But industry players will have to wait for government approval, including the finalization of level 3 lockdown regulations. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
It's 18:34 GMT, time for a short break. Here's what's coming up shortly. More than 2 million self-employed people have requested financial aid in the United Kingdom. And Italy is further easing restrictions around COVID-19.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. These are some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. The World Health Organization has kicked off its first ever virtual assembly. The Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the opening ceremony through a video link. He called on the WHO to lead the global fight against COVID-19. He reassured the planet that China is transparent and responsible in its handling of the outbreak. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa joined other leaders from across the world in supporting the WHO. Ramaphosa is currently the chair of the African Union. During the WHO's World Health Assembly, he reaffirmed Africa's support for the organization. He also noted that Africa needs help in the form of debt relief, diagnostics, drugs and medical supplies as well. And finally, the Egyptian government has released a coexisting with COVID-19 plan. The document has been composed by Egypt's health ministry. It divides life under the coronavirus into 3 stages, and it's urging the public to implement these steps until the pandemic is finally over. That's a run through your headlines. On to the United Kingdom now. More than 2 million claims have been made under an emergency plan to provide income support for self-employed persons. The British Finance Minister Rishi Sunak says that the grants claimed are estimated to cost the taxpayers some $7.4 billion, and they serve an estimated 8 million people so far. Despite the implementation of the scheme, the UK's unemployment rate is set to more than double to 10% in the second quarter of the year.
The self-employment support scheme opened last week ahead of schedule and provides support worth up to £7,500 to millions of individuals. I'm pleased to tell the House that at the end of yesterday, there had been more than 2 million claims, with grants worth £6 billion in total being claimed for. Those people will have the money in their bank accounts within 6 working days of their claim, and of course I will keep the scheme under review. But it's important to remember this is a scheme that now covers, as I said, close to 30 million workers, and as of the end of last week, 8 million people from around 1 million businesses are covered by this scheme and having their wages paid by the government to protect their jobs and their future security.
The head of China's National Health Commission has called for global unity in dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. While speaking at the 73rd session of the World Health Assembly through a video link, Ma Xiaowei added that there was a need to offer support to the leading role of the World Health Organization in dealing with this pandemic and getting it under control.
Ministers, delegates, we would like to thank the DG's report. I would like to express my deep condolences to those who lost their lives from COVID-19 and pay tribute to the healthcare workers who are fighting on the front line. The Chinese government has long put people's life and health in the first place. President Xi Jinping personally commanded, led and deployed the work. China insists on early detection, reporting, isolation and treatment, while gathering patients and pooling experts' resources and treatment measures with great efforts and sacrifices. So far, the local spread of the diseases in China has been basically curbed. The COVID-19 is the common enemy of mankind. China has been working with the international community in a timely, open, transparent, and responsible manner, including informing them of the outbreak and sharing the whole genome sequence, as well as primers and probes. Bearing in mind the precious support of the international community, we have provided medical supplies, technical support, assistance to countries in need within our capacity. China will actively participate in WHO's efforts. Dear Ministers, interests of all countries are closely linked and the destiny of mankind is shared. I call on all parties to unite and support the leadership of WHO and resolutely oppose rumors, stigmatization, and discrimination. We work together to definitely overcome the outbreak and make progress towards achieving health-related SDGs.
China's Commerce Minister Zhong Shan says that China is exploring new outlets while consolidating traditional markets in order to deal with a global economy that's been hit pretty hard by this COVID-19 pandemic. He and two other vice ministers spoke on Monday during a press conference. It also touched on foreign trade, foreign investments, and the resignation of the WTO's Director General, Roberto Azevedo. CGTN's reporter Wang Wei has that story.
In light of shrinking international market demand, blamed widely on COVID-19, China's foreign trade and commerce now face unprecedented challenges. Many trade-related companies face difficulties from capital shortages, decreasing demand, and risks to the industrial and supply chains. Chinese Commerce Minister Zhong Shan says, besides the company's own efforts, the government has also been helping them with the tax rebates, credit insurance, supporting cross-border e-commerce, helping them sell products to the domestic market, and more.
While consolidating traditional markets, we are also exploring new markets. The demand from Belt and Road-related countries saw a big rise in the first 4 months of this year, and the Association of Southeastern Asian Nations has become our country's largest trading partner.
Besides the challenges facing China's foreign trade, the global coronavirus epidemic has also disrupted the global industrial and supply chains. The development of both has mainly benefited from free trade and cross-border investments under the multilateral trading system within the core of the World Trade Organization. But a new change to the WTO may bring more uncertainty to this situation. Just a few days ago, the Director General of the WTO announced that he will resign before the end of his term. Many wonder how his resignation will affect the multilateral trading system and the WTO operations, and will this further affect the safety of the global industrial chain and supply chain.
China respects the Director General's decision. China will make efforts with other WTO members to ensure that the organization will keep its smooth operation. Under the wide-sprawling coronavirus, we believe in maintaining the openness, safety, and stability of the international industrial chain fits the interests of all parties. We urge WTO members to oppose unilateralism and protectionism, to maintain the openness of their markets, and to support the stability of the industrial chain and supply chain.
Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen also says that China will urge all parties to strengthen coordination in economic and trade policies and to make international transportation unobstructed, so that the trade chain, supply chain, and industrial chain among countries can be safe, stable, open, and unblocked. Wang Hui, CGTN, Beijing.
Shops have reopened in Milan and some people are calling for a return to work as Italy further eases its lockdown. Restaurants, bars, cafes right across the country are permitted on Monday to serve customers again as long as they adhered to physical distancing rules. Now, along with requiring reservations and placing tables at least 1 meter apart, restaurants have also been asked to keep a log with the client's details for a minimum of 14 days. That's essentially going to be allowing authorities to trace individuals in case of a COVID-19 infection. The reopening has long been advocated by regional authorities and business owners who are struggling to survive during the lockdown. To date, Italy has registered some 225,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Over 31,000 people have died as a result of this pathogen.
The reopening is positive. If the economy is to be saved, it will be welcome. But the fundamental thing is that citizens take advantage of this freedom with a certain criteria, so as not to create gatherings that would compromise their health and that of their fellow citizens.
We are angry because we have not been allowed to work for 3 months. We've been good so far, but now we have no more money to support our families. In 3 months, we have taken only 600 euros, and I have 3 children and I'm the only source of income in our family. That's why we are angry. Moreover, now we must also pay taxes. It's not fair.
On to the world's most famous flower exhibition now, the Chelsea Flower Show. It's going entirely online this year instead of opening in the real world. Growers work for years to debut their latest creations at this particular event. And it seems not even a pandemic can stop people from enjoying the flower season. CGTN's Catherine Drew has this report from London on what's hot tonight.
Arguably the world's most famous flower show, but this year, like so many other events, it's been cancelled in the real world. Instead, it's going online, with garden designers and florists due to give tours of their private gardens. Some hope it will provide a much-needed boost to the gardening industry. Garden centres have only just been allowed to reopen in England and Wales, having missed much of their peak business season.
It's definitely better than nothing. I think it's going to be a challenge. It'll be interesting to see how it comes out. I'm sure Chelsea will be back, though. I don't think it's going to replace Chelsea because the Chelsea experience is unique every year. I think what it gives the growers an opportunity to do is to show off those new varieties that they would have been working for years to get ready for this Chelsea.
This year's Chelsea Flower Show is asking people to send in pictures of their gardens and gardening achievements. Here's some of mine. And there's hope in the industry that the lockdown has given people, particularly children, time to take up gardening and created a new generation of customers.
I think there has been a huge resurgence in gardening and the interest in gardening because of lockdown, and clearly that's had its frustrations because people haven't been able to be exposed to the full choice and range that garden centres have had to would normally offer. But it has, I'm confident, renewed a huge interest. If nothing else, that whole conversation around mental health and well-being and all the science that exists behind that, I think has come into being now when people are isolated at home.
Benefits that customers seem to appreciate.
You know, we spend a lot of time hiking and going in the woods and into the forest, so to be able to again go outdoors and enjoy the garden is good for everyone's mental health, really.
With garden centres in England and Wales now open, those inspired by the Chelsea Flower Show can at least find the products to try this at home. Catherine Drew, CGTN, London.
Quick run through commodity prices for you. So some interesting trend as far as oil is concerned. In Kenya, frontier producer, if you can even call it that, Tala Oil has declared essentially force majeure. The country is about 750 odd million barrels of really waxy, thick crude that's yet to be fully exploited. Authorities are still talking about a commercial production date around 2023. How that's going to happen, we still don't know. Gold also had a relatively decent year. It actually got close to a 7-year high before retreating a little later. Back to oil though. Remember WTI negative contracts not too long ago? Well, it's having a very strong day today, rising by over 8% at one point in trading to just under $32 a barrel. Here's what's coming up shortly. We'll look at a startup in Tunisia that's tracing people who are not wearing masks in public spaces. And Egypt's Tahrir Square is getting a fresh look in order to attract more tourists. But will they come? We'll explore that next.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Our next story takes us to the intersection of health and technology. A Tunisian startup called Data Vision has rolled out a device recently capable of detecting who is and who isn't wearing a protective mask while in public places. That includes private and public health facilities, banks, stores and supermarkets as well. Here's CGTN's Adin Chouachi showing us how this device works on grassroots tonight.
Data Vision is a multi-platform solution that allows business owners to have real-time tracking data of their visitors' behavior, such as visit count, visit duration, conversion rate, visits timeline, age group, and gender recognition. The company has modernized its platform and joined the fight against coronavirus.
We've adapted our device's tracking option inside commercial shops to serve the fight against COVID-19. The real-time detection of people with or without the face mask is operational and instant.
The new device can also limit or ban access to any location for individuals who do not use face masks and neglect the prevention and sanitary measures put in place by the state.
Our device can be installed on any camera surveillance system. The user does not need to install new cameras. It detects people without masks, organizes queues while controlling any blocking access to a facility by closing automatic gates.
The multi-platform solution offers a safe work environment and reduces direct physical contact.
Even people using masks which do not cover their mouth and nose are identified and isolated. Our device ensures the safety of the clients and the employees while preventing contagion.
Some 32 technological initiatives aimed at helping the government to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic have so far been approved by the Joint Committee set up within the Ministry of Communication Technologies and Digital Transformation. The Special Scientific Committee is responsible for evaluating and approving the use and distribution of Tunisian inventions by the COVID-19 task force. The government is encouraging startups to invent new devices to help in the fight against the pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt's iconic Tahrir Square has been undergoing quite the makeover. The project was aimed at attracting a lot more tourists before the pandemic hit, but work is still ongoing, even though it's been adjusted to observe the restrictions needed to deal with this pandemic. Here's CGTN's Adela El Marouki with the details.
For months, 7 government entities have been collaborating to implement the biggest renovation project Tahrir Square has ever seen. The site for the 2011 and 2013 uprisings is being converted into an open-air museum. And with the seat of the government moving to a new Egyptian capital, this will become an area dedicated to tourism.
Tahrir Square has a deep place in our hearts as the location of the revolution. Since 2011, it went through several renovation phases. Lately, though, we are planning a pharaonic parade that will see the mummies of 22 ancient Egyptian kings get transported from the Egyptian Museum to the Museum of Civilization. That encouraged us to give the square an ancient Egyptian look.
At the heart of the square, a 19 meters high ancient Egyptian obelisk is now standing. It's being surrounded by 4 sphinx, acting as its guardians.
The entire Tahrir area is being renovated, not just the square. All buildings surrounding the square are classified as unique architecture. The newest is 130 years old. We have worked to restore these buildings to their original looks. We have removed all billboards to preserve the general look in the area.
To the sides of the obelisks, artificial waterfalls will be installed resembling the River Nile. Olive and palm trees now surround the pedestrian passage that connects the square to the Egyptian Museum.
We want to bring international attention to this project, so we will extend an invitation to 150 of the world's kings, presidents, and leaders to attend the pharaonic parade that will be held here.
From the plant's use to lighting, all the details in this project have been tailored to give Tahrir Square a touch of ancient Egypt. The square's inauguration is set for June 30th, but the bigger event, the parade for the 22 mummies, will be delayed until the global travel restrictions are lifted and tourism can resume. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies for you. We're swiftly getting back into rate-setting meeting territory. South Africa is the next one that we're keeping a very close eye on. That's happening on Thursday. And the last 4 weeks really have been kind of positive, actually, for the South African rand. Yes, we're not entirely used to seeing it around the 1830 range, but in the last 4 weeks, it's actually gained around 2.6% to the dollar. The bet in the market at the moment is that the South African Reserve Bank will actually cut rates for the 3rd meeting in a row. But will that happen? We'll find out and update you. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The news continues on CGTN.